going to talk to an industry expert. You're an industry expert. Michael Oss from Vice President Solutions at Maximus, who is also one of our gold sponsors. Welcome to the stage. You're going to help us think about an end-to-end approach to the total experience management, and particularly upgrading the citizen experience, which is something we really latched on yesterday, moving from customer to citizen thinking, through team mobilization, operations optimization, and technology innovation. So you're going to tell us how to get it done. Is that what we're looking for?
Sure, absolutely.
Have a great, thank you. We'll look forward to hearing you.
All right, thank you very much. So I am going to talk about total experience management. You might be thinking, what does that mean when we say total experience management? It's really this intersection of citizen experience, to use that terminology, we love that term, employee experience, and continuous innovation. And so hopefully today, some of the things that we do in Maximus might be transferable to the work that you're doing day to day, or you might see some potential areas for insight. So that's my goal today, is to convey some of that information. I wouldn't call myself an expert. I might have some expertise in certain areas, but certainly not an expert in anything in particular. A little bit about Maximus. We are a global organization. We have offices in the United Kingdom, Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, the United States, India, and obviously in Canada. We're a public sector focused organization. We only do work with public sector entities. So that kind of differentiates us a little bit in terms of how we operate within different jurisdictions. In Canada, we really do three things. Number one, we do citizen services digitally enabled. What does that mean? That's essentially contact center delivery, managed service provision. And so we do some very large contact center delivery in Canada. We support Service British Columbia, both for our staff providing service, a platform for ministries where their staff are providing service, as well as outreach into the service delivery offices across the province. We're also getting ready for a federal election. We support Elections Canada, and so we provide the Tier 1 support contact center for the upcoming election. The second thing we do is Future of Health. And in Canada, we have a platform that does health administration services, whether or not that's drug, pharmacy, beneficiaries, provider, medical travel, a whole range of services that you would expect to find in Canada's health sector. And we deliver that in 9 out of the 13 provinces and territories, as well as the Bahamas, which is actually a growth area for us. And last but not least, advanced technologies for modernization. This is typically where we would go into an organization, work directly with the CIO and the IT staff, look for ways to modernize, remove legacy debt, and we provide a wide range of services. Everything from intelligent document processing with modern technology and AI to contact center delivery from a platform perspective if an organization is looking for just the platform. And we also provide advanced analytics and artificial intelligence. If you're interested in that last component, one of my colleagues, Andrew Bailey, is going to be conveying one of the roundtables right after this, and you can dig into that a little bit more with him at that session. Ooh, there we go. So maybe to warm us up a little bit, I'm just interested in 1 or 2 words, what key factors or factors have the biggest impact on customer experience from your perspective? Let's see what comes up here. Systems integration, okay. Love the technology side of this. We can get into that. Convenience, yeah. People, absolutely critical, yeah. Excellent. So some great elements here. I think this ties in really nicely to what I want to convey. I'll try to weave some of these ideas into the presentation as well, and certainly if there's anything in particular here that you're raising and there's an opportunity at the end for Q&A, I can dig into some of that as well. In the context of customer or citizen experience, Maximus does a lot of things. I'm going to zero in on contact center delivery, but all of these services that we offer have an element of customer or citizen experience embedded within them. But for the purpose of today's presentation, I'm just going to zero in on contact center delivery specific examples and use cases. So total experience management. So I came back from Europe a few months ago. I took a bit of a vacation. My partner actually works for the United Nations in Austria, so it was a great opportunity to see her. When I came back, my credit card didn't work. And so that was a bit frustrating. I wasn't sure why. And so I went onto the website, channel number 1, to try to find out what was going on, and there was no indication. By the way, any bankers in here? Anybody from the banking industry? Safe space? Okay, that's good. I'm going to pick on the bank a little bit here. I won't say which bank it is. So I check on the website. There's no indication, nothing in the inbox, no note that my credit card isn't working correctly, nothing like that. I use the mobile app, same kind of deal. Second channel. Third channel, I go into web chat. I have a web chat session. Unfortunately, there's no information provided, and I'm advised to contact customer services. It was in the evening. I had to wait till the next day. Fourth channel now, contact customer service. And of course, I go through the upfront prompting. I'm sure everybody's kind of experienced this, where they ask for your banking number, your PIN number, your date of birth to identify you. I go through all of that, properly identifies me. I'm now speaking to a customer service representative, and sadly, I have to go through the exact same authentication process all over again. Has anybody experienced that, where you enter all that data? Yeah, a lot of head nods out there. Foreshadowing. I speak to the customer service representative, and they say, there's nothing on file other than you need to contact security. So we have no idea why your credit card's not working. It's a different phone number. I can't warm transfer you, and you've got to contact other customer contact center yourself. Here's the number. So I hang up. So now I've got 5 channels of integration, totally different contact center, different voice prompts, different voice, different navigation. I finally get through to authenticate myself, hence the foreshadowing. I authenticate myself again, and then I speak to a customer service representative, having been properly identified, and I have to authenticate myself again. So that was a bit frustrating going through all of that. Not so great customer experience, and I actually poked a little bit and said, is there a reason why you couldn't have provided, in the web chat or in the mobile app or on the website or even customer service, why my card wasn't working? Because I was a bit concerned. And it was like, yeah, that's just not something we do, and our system doesn't talk to one another, and the employee's explaining this to me. And then I asked, what about the authentication? Like, I had to do it 4 times. And I was told that they don't really trust that authentication, even though they're notified that there's a proper authentication. The trust level within the staff isn't such that they're going to rely on it 100% of the time. So they're given the option to actually re-authenticate if they have concerns. So that's an example of not so great customer experience. I think if you mapped out the journey map, there'd be a lot of frowny faces on that. If any of you have gone through that exercise before, my persona wasn't exemplified through that process in any way, shape, or form. The employee experience wasn't great. So great empathy from the employees, providing support, but they were caught in the middle. They had to explain why the systems weren't operating. They had to make excuses to why something wasn't functioning the way it should function, and that's concerning. And innovation, these systems didn't talk together, 2 totally separate contact centers, the authentication having to be done a total of 4 times. Not very good innovation there in terms of the technology integration. So when we talk about total experience management, we're really talking about how do we bring all of these components together and think of them as a holistic system instead of individual considerations for delivery of service. So when we think about government programs, this funnel diagram, lots of challenges for program delivery in the public sector. There's policy, there's regulations, there's training. All of these things get filtered down to deliver a particular program. A citizen is provided a service. At the end, the hope is that they've received some kind of benefit. But there's also wasted insights. So some of the things that we call out here in terms of government citizen experience is that, we're looking at efficiency over impact. Yes, the contact center is low cost, but we're actually not making a significant impact. And that's an area that we tend to focus in on quite often. Data without action. The amount of data that's collected in an interaction, the example I just gave, my sentiment, the types of discussions, the transcription, the ability to enter that data and analyze it and say, was this a bad customer journey? And extract that information and make meaningful change. That's an example where we've got lots of data, but we're really not taking action on that data. And then, of course, technology without strategy. We've implemented this fantastic identification mechanism, but our staff aren't comfortable with it, they don't trust it, and they don't use it. So we've missed that opportunity. We view this as next generation citizen experience, and really what we try to focus on when we're engaging with different clients. So when we think about this is really an evolution. If you think about efficiency at one end of the spectrum and insights-driven government type of activities in the other end of the spectrum, there's a bit of a maturity model here. But I'll use a real-world example. So if you're thinking about efficiency, you want a contact center established, maybe you've got 1 channel voice, maybe a second email channel, and you've got staff, and they're covering the hours of operation. You're good to go. You're efficient. You've kept the costs low. You've hired just the staff you need to keep those hours of operation going. When you move into the second phase or the second stage in terms of operational effectiveness, really what we're looking at there is, am I meeting certain service level targets? Is customer satisfaction high? Am I containing calls at tier 1? Is the average speed of answer within a particular target? Are all of those things actually hitting on all the right cylinders? And so that's generally the focus where many organizations are at, this combination of effectiveness and efficiency. Well, what is this transformational stage, this insights-driven stage? Well, that's where we're taking data and potentially in near real time, adjusting our knowledge, adjusting the interaction that's happening with the citizen, being proactive with them, taking sentiment analysis, maybe modifying a policy same day. I know that sounds a little bit crazy, but is there an opportunity to actually take that information and say, listen, we just rolled out a new policy update. That policy update is confusing for some citizens. Let's rapidly adjust the knowledge, and let's give them an alternate pathway so that they can actually get those answers more quickly, because we're getting a lot of calls for that. That's that kind of insights-driven approach with all of the bells and whistles that can come along with that. So we've talked about the what. The what is really this continuum of citizen experience, from efficiency to effectiveness to transformation. The how we do it is through a platform, and I'm going to zero in on the platform in a moment and explain the gory details of how we approach that. But what's really important here is the why. Why would we do this? So advanced knowledge. I know Mark Dillon gave a bit of an example about amazing citizen experience in his discussion this morning. If you're using all of the capabilities and all the technologies that are available, you can tailor knowledge in real time to be predicting what the customer is going to be calling in about for a queue, because you just got 18 calls just like it, and presenting that knowledge and prioritizing that knowledge for a citizen. This advanced knowledge management capability. And that implies that your knowledge needs to be fully automated in terms of governance. You need to be able to make adjustments to that knowledge quickly. And so how do you do that? There has to be some degree of approval mechanism and governance that's established there as well. So that's another key factor. The feedback loop for the agents. This knowledge isn't satisfying the question I'm being asked by the customer. How quickly can that be responded to and taken action? So that's another example of why we would do this. Digital twins is another example of this. Having a platform and having it automated in terms of our ability to stand it up allows us to very rapidly instantiate another instance of that platform and do all sorts of really cool things. There was some discussion from Infrastructure Ontario yesterday about the importance of digital twins in terms of city improvement and planning. We use digital twins to simulate call interactions to make sure that our scripting and everything along those lines is functioning correctly. We'll use a digital twin to optimize staffing models. Do we have the right skill sets and the right queues at the right time based on previous and predicted activities that are going to be happening? And last but not least, training. This is something we actually are starting to do quite a bit of. We'll actually take previous calls, we'll anonymize the data, we'll feed that into AI, and we'll have a new hire actually sit down on the desk in the system that they're running with the same tools that are available to them, that they'd have exactly the same in production, and run them through some real-world scenarios with a voice walking them through those kinds of calls. And that's really important because they're now completely prepared to take an actual live call, because they've actually taken 10 of the most challenging, frustrating calls that we can throw at them. But without that, they've got to build that knowledge and that experience over time. So this is another key example of using digital twins. So how do we do it? I think this is going to work here. There we go. So there's a lot of components here. It's a busy diagram. Ultimately, we're trying to mobilize team and provide exceptional capability for our staff. We're trying to optimize operations to deliver exceptional value to the citizen. And there's a whole bunch of factors here. There's an omni-channel capability. What are the channels the customers can come in to engage? There's a CRM function. Probably have to create a case file. Reporting, that's really important. It's going to drive insights that we want to make. We've got AI microservices that might be helping summarize a call and embed that information in the CRM. And communications, what is the cloud IVR? What's the technology there to support interactions? And you might think, okay, what are the 5 technologies that we're using here? It isn't 5, it's a lot. And you might think, what, you deploy a contact center with ServiceNow and with Salesforce and with Dynamics at the same time? We don't. What this allows us to do is rapidly plug and play technologies based on the context of A, what is the customer actually looking for? And B, sometimes when we engage customers, they've already got an investment in ServiceNow. Let's capitalize on that. If it's already embedded within the organization, let's consider that as the CRM platform of choice. And so this ecosystem behind this is layers of API integration and monitoring that allow us to swap out a technology and swap in a technology to solve a particular problem for a particular customer group. And all of that's really important in terms of delivering value. I'll give a real example here with at the top there, maybe hard to see in the back, but there's a live video channel that exists. So we've activated a live video channel for Service British Columbia. In BC, there's a mobile app. Some of the services that are available in that mobile app require a level 3 identification for anybody that's in the IDAM space, a level 3 assurance to confirm that that person is who they say they are that's interacting with that mobile experience. And to do that, historically, citizens would have to go into a service delivery office in one of the many locations in the province of BC to basically confirm they are who they say they are. What we've enabled is an ability to do that live from the convenience of their home via the app to initiate an omni-channel call that results in our ability to say, touch your nose, touch your ear. We go through a number of steps to validate that hasn't been faked, there's no AI being used, and we can accurately identify that particular individual. So that's been a real game changer in terms of providing capability and, quite frankly, convenience, bringing the service to the citizen instead of the citizen to the service. That investment in that particular channel interaction within this platform ecosystem allowed us to take that same video capability and embed it within a digital kiosk. So we now have a digital kiosk service in the province of BC where citizens can come in to a location which may or may not be a service delivery office. They can interact with a kiosk and initiate a call with a live agent, and that agent can have the same type of interactive experiences. And this is important because we have some members of community that perhaps don't have a home computer, aren't on the internet, they're coming into a service delivery office, it's busy, how can we maximize the value to that individual citizen? Let's give them an opportunity to be able to have that same interaction with a remote agent. Or deploying these kiosks in scenarios where there are no live resources. For example, the wildfire scenario that's occurred a number of times in BC over the last few years, this ability to forward deploy kiosks into areas where we can't easily deploy the same number of staff we would normally want to deploy. And all of this data that we're collecting, the quality assurance, the transcriptions, translation in some cases, the follow-ups, the CSAT scoring, all of that is embedded in the same TXM platform. It's not a bolt-on, it's fully integrated. We're integrating it into the cloud IVR, and in the case of Service BC, we use Genesys for that implementation. So all of the benefits of Genesys that would apply to a voice call, over audio or a web chat, all of our knowledge integration, all the insights we would get from those channels are now immediately accessible with no modification whatsoever in a video or a kiosk interaction. So this platform approach has given us that extensibility capability. I should also note that in terms of this platform, we've got this concept of being modular. We can plug in and play, flexible, depends on what the customer is looking for. We might make a recommendation for one component over the other, and scalable. You may be looking at this and going, wow, that's a lot. That must be for really big contact centers like Service BC. This can scale down to contact centers of 10 people. So the ability to be able to scale this down dramatically to provide the same capabilities or scale it up into the thousands of agents as required, that was a key design factor in terms of non-functional requirements for this capability, with all the same security controls, all the same automation, and all the same potential for capability depending on where an organization is in terms of their maturity level. So I've talked about the technology, I've talked about this kind of citizen experience perspective. I want to talk a little bit about employee experience. Maybe just to ask a couple questions here, similar to the questions or the story that I told earlier on, but is anybody called into a contact center and the agent says something like, I'm really sorry, my laptop or the system's really slow today, just give me a minute. Yeah, some head nods there, there we go. Or you call in, they say, I'm really sorry, I can't answer that question, I have to get a supervisor, do you mind if I put you on hold for a few minutes? That's another one that I've experienced. Or the authentication system that you just went through, my apologies, you have to go through that again with me now, in the example, the story that I gave. So these are all not great employee experiences. We train our staff to be empathetic and really kind of work with the customer and really understand their needs, and we're putting them in a really tough spot where they've got to make excuses. and they've got to explain why something isn't working or why there's no potential. And if that's happening, that data is just as rich and important as the data we would collect for a citizen to determine how can we make adjustments and modifications to the service to maximize that employee's experience. We have a white paper that's coming out possibly by the end of this week, definitely next week. If you're interested in that, we talk about how do you achieve better customer experience through improving employee experience. And so that's going to be coming out very shortly. I'd encourage you to take a look at that. On those lines, Gartner did a study recently, and they said that organizations that optimize for employee experience are 48% more likely to achieve improved customer satisfaction. So that's a pretty compelling case, that if we're taking care of our employees will take care of the customer. And so that's a really key area. Another example that often comes up is knowledge management. If we've got siloed delivery, we've got different pockets of knowledge, how do we collect all that knowledge and bring it together so that those employees have access to everything? Sometimes we'll train an employee in another system. We don't want them to have to use another knowledge base. The days of SharePoint folders with an AI front end, they don't really work. We really need something a little bit more capable that supports the employee and predicts the type of questions that are coming in and gives them the opportunity to provide feedback. And we think knowledge management in particular is kind of a critical but often overlooked component of enhancing that employee experience. So I've talked about technology, I've talked about customer experience, I've talked about employee experience and how those three things are brought together. I just want to zoom out again here and just kind of recognize this all comes down to citizens. These are citizens that are trying to get health care, they're trying to get a bill paid, they're trying to get reconciliation, they're trying to get a drug service. All of these things matter. There are people's lives at stake here. And so when we think about this continuum of citizen experience, when we look at, I'll use an example around workforce management to just kind of tie this all together. So if we're thinking about the first stage of efficiency, workforce management is, I've got 10 staff, I need to put them in 2 shifts, some people might take vacation, I need to publish the shift schedule, and I'm good to go. I've achieved workforce management. I can probably do it in a spreadsheet. Many of you may do that in spreadsheets today. That's okay. That happens. When you get to that effectiveness stage, you now need to start thinking about when do I need to maximize staff for a particular time of day or a particular season? Do I need surge support for those periods of time? How do I forecast for that? Now I need some technology to kind of embed in here. I need to understand the citizen patterns that exist. I need to ensure my staff have the ability to still take vacation in the summer if summer happens to be the busiest time of year for a particular program. How do I plan for that? Oh, that was weird. I'm back. And if we're thinking about this kind of insights-driven government, what does that look like? So think of a scenario where calls are coming in and we've got a system that's monitoring those calls. It's created a profile for every staff member. It knows their skills. It knows how effective they've been handling similar types of calls for that skill set. And it's doing an analysis to determine which staff need to be allocated to which skills for which queues on which days based on real-time performance and future forecasts. Now we've got some artificial intelligence. You can do this in your head, but I know that there's some tools out there. Genesys, for example, has a fantastic workforce management automation engine that spends hours poring over this data to then determine, oh, you know what? This is the best interaction model and the best staffing requirement for this particular service delivery model. And so when you think about workforce management through these 3 stages, that's an example where it ties all of this together. It ties the employee's experience. Do they know when they're going to have to work? It ties in the customer experience or citizen experience. Are they getting the quality service and the insights that they're looking for out of the program? And it also ties in all of these things together into what we describe as total experience management. And so maybe I'll just close here to say I am really passionate about this. I've been working with government now for about 20 years. I love this space. I really care about the work that we do. And our goal is really to move citizens forward. And so maybe we have some time now for Q&A. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Michael. All right, we're going to go to our crowd for questions. Quiet.
Thank
Right
you.
here, and then off on the side. Go ahead. Sorry.
So I know that example was specific to like a call-in kind of center. Do you have scenarios where you're working with government spaces and you're working with like legacy type of infrastructure? That's the contract they have. It's not up for renewal, perhaps for a couple of years. You're going to work with what they've got. Are you in those spaces often? And how would your team strategize in that kind of moment?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I think most organizations have, I'll call them investments they've made. Some of them might be legacy debt. And that component provides a critical function, and it has to be grafted into the service that we're delivering. And that happens often. And the idea of having this platform approach that allows us to integrate seamlessly with some of these other systems allows for a stepping stone where that component might, to your point, take a couple of years before it is up for a potential refresh, before it can be satisfied. And so that's another mindset that we have to go through. And making sure that works, sometimes there's constraints that have to be dealt with, but at least we're upfront and understand what those constraints are, and we can sometimes provide workarounds or ways to augment that. A great example we often apply is robotic process automation. We've got this system, there's no API for it, it's an interface that somebody has to log on to, and we want to get data from here into there. That's a very manual process today. Could we solve for that in terms of enhancing some citizen experience delivery program? And the short answer is yes. We'll use some robotic process automation to mimic somebody filling out that form. Often it still requires somebody to validate that information before it's concluded, but that dramatically makes an improvement without necessarily having to swap out that legacy technology.
Thank you. Right here on your right.
Thank you. Great presentation. Could you speak a little bit about quality assurance for the agents, the call center?
Sure. So there's two types of quality assurance that I have had experience with, where you take a certain percentage of calls that have taken place over a day or a month, you analyze those calls as an average, and then you derive what the quality is across the board, and you would have targeted training based on findings out of that subset. The technology now, and some of the technologies we use, depending on the nature of the contact center, not every organization is ready for this, but in some cases we do 100% quality assurance. So every single call goes through a quality assurance check, again, using AI. We look for keywords, we look for the proper introduction, we do sentiment analysis to determine if the customer leaves the call happy. If they're not happy, it's probably a candidate for QA. And that shifts the whole QA function from a random sample. Let's pick the worst 10 calls out of that day, or the worst 20 calls out of a week, and focus on those, because those are the ones that are likely to have the biggest net impact and benefit for all the other citizens that are going to be coming in. That could be training, that could be procedural. All of those things would typically come out of a normal QA function, but leveraging technology gives us the ability to actually not pick 10, but pick 100%, and then focus in on the worst calls and make sure that we address those right off the bat.
Michael, you gave some examples around, not necessarily a positive experience. Mark earlier on as well kind of gave a good experience versus a bad experience. And everybody in the room was nodding their heads like, I did that, I ran into that. So we're familiar with that. I wonder, what's the public sector getting wrong about not fixing the very things we all experience on a day-to-day and we know getting in the way of a better customer experience?
Yeah, so there's a lot of reasons for that. There's organizational structure often gets in the way. I think it's Conway's law that most organizations mimic delivery based on their org structure. And so sometimes organizational structure requires somebody to come in and look horizontally across those program areas and say, there's an opportunity for improvement here that individually by each organizational unit, they may not see that horizon, but having that insight to look for those particular opportunities. I know there's a lot of negatives. Maybe I'll tell a bit of a positive.
Yeah.
I'm a veteran, served with the Canadian Air Force for a number of years, worked for NORAD.
Service.
And one of the things that we're doing in Maximus for the VA in the US is that we actually are using sentiment analysis, and this is something that we brought to the group to say, your mission is ultimately to support veterans. Could we use sentiment analysis to actually predict that we might have a veteran in distress? And this is a very real issue. It's an issue in Canada. It's an issue worldwide in terms of veterans that sadly have taken their own lives. And that is a real problem. And it's a real mission of these different organizations worldwide to solve for that. Using the sentiment analysis, we're actually able to determine that we may actually have a call with a veteran that's in distress, and we can actually take effective action for that. That isn't one particular part of the organization. That's a mission-centric, whole of delivery kind of consideration that drove decisions and discussions with various departments to say, can we solve for this particular problem? Because one department might be looking at the psychology of that, another department might be looking at the call volumes and the effectiveness of the call center, another department might be looking at the financials. When you bring all of those things together, then you can start to look for these potential insights. So I think often organizational structure can sometimes get in the way. It's inspiring when I hear, for example, Chris describe from World Vision coming in and trying to shake up that model and try to say, don't talk to the World Vision staff. They're going to be opposed to innovation. I think that happens in many of our organizations. We kind of get stuck in our ways. And it's the requirement really is to have somebody that thinks outside of that. It doesn't need to be a third party. It could be somebody in your organization that has a role of innovation to be looking horizontally across these programs and looking for these potential capabilities and opportunities.
A little bit of a disruptor is what we kind of need in the mix.
Exactly.
Well, thank you very much, Michael. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks.
Was there a question? Thank you.